Hello, I've been wanting to do this video for a while and talk a bit about BMW E12 M535i values. There's some misconceptions and flat out incorrect information out there, and also just some things that I think are overlooked, and I'm going to pull together a lot of different numbers. I've done some analysis and just put together thoughts that I have generally on the topic and make a recommendation and bring awareness to this topic in the BMW collector circles. So let's get started. I have a couple different areas that I'm going to cover today. I'm going to briefly touch on what is an E12 M535i, like my car here. Also, what is the inception of the BMW E12 M535 with Motorsport, and kind of talk about a period of about 10 years. I'm also going to talk about what I've coined in just my own term, the Fab Four of BMW Motorsport in the 70s and early 80s. I'm going to talk about that. Also, why are these cars, the E12s, rejected by BMW Motorsport enthusiasts? Why are they dismissed? I have some theories that we're gonna go through, and then I'm gonna wrap it up with some cars for sale that I've seen and what the listings seem to be, the few of them that there are, talk about some comps out there and appraisals of what these cars may be worth. And then I'll wrap it up with my final thoughts. So what is a E12 M535i? Well, I'm gonna be hitting some topics and some terminology in this video that are based on BMW terminology, like the chassis code. So E12, that would be the first 5 series from 1972 through about 1981. The BMW E28 came after that. There's a little bit of overlap in the beginning, but for the US market, think of it as 1982 through 1988. I'm also going to talk about some other chassis codes for other BMWs, like the E9 coupes in the 70s. But what is the E12 M535? So this car was the first official BMW Motorsport sedan made as BMW Motorsport was starting to build street cars. These were only made in 1980 and 81. What the features were and why this is unique, it took the M90 high big bore short stroke version of the M30 engine, the M90 3.5 liter, which made 218 horsepower, had an oil cooler, a close ratio 5-speed manual, and a limited slip rear end. All of that came from BMW 635 CSI that was in Europe, but they put it in the 4-door. What they did beyond that at BMW Motorsport were the front and rear spoilers. This stripe package was actually a real option, and it's in all the poster literature cars and also the brochure that I'm going to show you. These cars had factory Recaro seats. There's special suspension made up of shocks, springs, sway bars, even some special bushings that were unique to the Motorsport version of the E12. Different wheels, uprated front brakes from a 7 series, a 240 kilometer per hour speedometer instead of the 220 in the 528, the non-Motorsport E12. And then it has an M1 style steering wheel. It's a little slightly larger diameter than the M1, but it's otherwise identical to the M1 steering wheel. So 218 horsepower in 1980, 81 in a 4-door sedan. For a bit of context, in 1980, a Jaguar XJ6 had 176 horsepower. A Corvette in the US had 190 horsepower, and even the Ferrari 308 GTB had about 214 horsepower. And this was 218 in a 4-door sedan. Very unique, very much a precedent that BMW was setting then about could we sell motorsport cars to enthusiasts on the street who want something special in a different package. Now I want to talk about the Motorsport 5 Series cars, and I'm going to go from about 1978 through 1988 for this period of what was happening at BMW. First, you have the E12 M535i's, and even the pre-production prototypes that were made for special customers were one-offs before that, and those were happening up to 78 and 79. But the M535i's were 80 and 81. They made 1,410 of them, but only 960 of them were left-hand drive. Then you had the E28 chassis 5 Series. The E28 M5 had 2,200 cars made. 1,900 of those were left-hand drive, most of which were the black-only cars that came to the U.S. market. Then you had the E28 M535i. They made over 10,000 of those, and about 7,400 of those were left-hand drive. But some of those were even automatic cars, automatic transmission cars. The E12s only came in a manual. The E28 M5 only came in a manual. So you have this period where BMW is establishing themselves for building performance-minded enthusiast sedans for the street with high horsepower. However, the gray market was going on in the 80s, and people were importing cars, not going to the dealer in the US, importing cars directly from Europe, favorable exchange rate from the dollar to the Deutschmark. And the E12 had already completed by 1981. The production ended and they went to the E28. By the time the mid-80s gray market craze was going on, why would people import a car that was already 4 or 5 years old when they could import a brand new M5 or a brand new M535i? So what I'm saying is very few of these cars made it into the United States during the gray market. They never sold these in the US to begin with. BMW didn't. So the only ones that are here came in privately, and that would have been during the gray market. But they also made so many more of the E28 M535i's and the E28 M5s even, that these were just really a handful coming here. I'm also focusing on the left-hand drive cars because the German market is also left-hand drive. Those sedans are really the true collector blue chip status for a BMW enthusiast. So when you go through these numbers of 960 left-hand drive E12s, 1,900 E28 M5s, and 7,400 E28 M535i's, it really highlights how few and rare and special these were. Now I'm going to talk about what I refer to as the Motorsport Fab 4. I'm going to talk about production numbers, again focusing on the left-hand drive cars. And I'm going to make the case for collector status of the E12 M535i. So in the 70s, we have, in the 70s and early 80s, we have the BMW M1, very well known. They made 453 of those. They go for about $500,000 to $900,000 in today's market, and many of them still survive. The BMW CSL in the early to mid 70s, that was a motorsport project or a product from BMW Motorsport, homologation of their race car. 1,265 of those were produced. However, only, I have my notes here on the next page, 765 of those were left-hand drive on the E9 CSLs. And then a very few number of those were Batmobiles. So a lot of survivability for those, but they still had a lot of rust issues. And then we go to the 2002 Turbo. 1,672 were produced, and a large amount of them survived. They were all left-hand drive, all 1,672. The 2002 Turbo are changing hands now for about $100,000 to maybe as much as $200,000. The E9 CSLs are probably $150,000 to $300,000, maybe closer to $500,000 for a Batmobile. And those values have been very comfortably well into the six figures, especially for the CSLs and O2s. The M1 was already well into the six figures even 15 years ago. So in summary, all three of those products, the 2002 Turbo, the CSL, and the M1, no one questions their BMW Motorsport status. But yet the E12 M535i is not always included in that period, or it's dismissed, and I'm going to talk about why. So there are not a lot of auction grade, auction data sales for E12 M535s because there are so few left. They rusted, they were used up as daily drivers. and also just overlooked by many people, so they didn't get that cachet as a collector car. As I said, 960 of these were left-hand drive. There were others made in South Africa as of complete knockdown kits, and also they went to Australia. There were some E12, E28 hybrids that went to Australia and South Africa. I'm not talking about those. I'm specifically talking about the original 1980 and 81 left-hand drive cars. So my contention is that these cars should be up there with the value of 2002 turbos. They should be comfortably in the $100,000 range. Not CSL prices, but these are rare enough and overlooked enough that this is a market that needs attention for any true serious BMW collector. Why is the E12 M535i unfairly scorned? These are some thoughts I put together on this topic. So the BMW Motorsport cars at that period had a racing pedigree and a homologation status for the M1 and the CSL. The E12s were never raced except in South Africa. They had a 530 MLE version that was a homologation special. That was a right-hand drive car, very specific to South Africa. Again, I'm focusing on the left-hand drive E12 M535s. These were never raced, and therefore there was no need to make a homologated version. So maybe that's why they don't have the cachet of the other cars like the M1 and the CSL. The closest association with the racing program, and actually it's a very important one of this period, these E12s were given to the factory racing drivers in many cases as a perk, as a car for the street. I actually had this verified a few years ago. I was at Road America in Wisconsin. David Hobbs, the BMW racing driver in that period, was signing books, and I talked to him and I showed him a picture of my car on my phone, and I said, David, is it true that these were given as perks to the factory race drivers? And he said, oh yeah, I didn't have one, but my fellow colleague and other racing driver on the team, he had one of these. So confirmed from the man himself, David Hobbs, these were very much part of the BMW Motorsport racing program at that time. The BMW Motorsport M-Power valve cover argument. This is the one that always gets me and is always repeated on the internet to anyone who'll listen. Oh, well, the E12, this doesn't have an M-Power engine. It doesn't say M-Power on the valve cover, so it's not a BMW M product. Well, during this time, the 2002 Turbo and the E9 CSL did not have BMW M-Power on the valve cover. Yes, the M1 did, but those other two cars, no one ever questions their motorsport pedigree, but they didn't have a special engine that had that written on the valve cover. So that's not a valid argument of why the E12 should or shouldn't be considered a motorsport product. Advertising alongside the race program cars. So I have the brochure here, the E12 M535 brochure. Note that it says special version by BMW Motorsport. So what else can you say? But look at this. Look at the front cover. The E12 is shown with the M1 Pro car right behind it. It was clearly part of BMW Motorsport. And then if you go in, there's an overlay here where this page folds out. They have the BMW M1 Pro car engine, and then if you lift this page, it goes to the engine of the E12 M535i. So definitely a part of BMW's motorsport heritage, and these cars were built at BMW Motorsport, which I'm going to talk about. I also have a favorite advertisement. I have it framed, and I'll show it here in the video and show a screenshot of it. UK advertisement at the time for the BMW, the E12 M535, where it says we took the power plant or the heart of our racing car and put it in the M535i. So that's something I'll show. The production facilities, the Preußenstraße versus Garching in the later 80s. So Preußenstraße was the original Skunk Works race shop, engine shop, and the early M car production shop for building these street cars. It's unclear if some M1s might have been finished at Preußenstrasse at the BMW Motorsport facility. There's a lot of videos out there. I'm not going to repeat it about how the M1 was built and Lamborghini involvement, but it's possible that some of them were at that facility before delivery to customers. However, the 2002 turbos were built on the standard 2002 assembly line in Munich. The E9 CSLs were built by Karmann at the Rhine German factory, so neither the O2 or the E9 were built at Preußenstrasse, where BMW Motorsport was in the 70s. The E12s were built at Preußenstrasse at BMW Motorsport. So how can they not be considered a motorsport product? And even at that time, BMW Motorsport had been building those special pre-production E12s at the Preußenstrasse Motorsport facility during the late 70s. And how these were built, the shells started at the Dingolfing 5 Series plant, and then the partially assembled shells were transported over to BMW Motorsport at that Preußenstrasse facility, where the rest of the car was hand assembled. Suspension, interior trim, the spoilers, all those other details. That makes it a true motorsport product. Like, let there be no question about that. All right, I also want to just briefly touch on two hypotheticals of what could have happened with the E12 M535i. We can only wish this had happened back in the day if they had known how successful these cars and the BMW M5 would be later. What if they had made an E12 M535i that had the aero bits on it, like a CSL Batmobile? That would have made it a great car and a very significant part of BMW Motorsport. Also, this is a big flyer and would have been a very expensive car, but what if they had taken the M1's M88 engine and put it in the E12 M535i as a street car? That would have been amazing. That would have been a blue chip collector car if they had that today, but unfortunately they didn't. Now I'm going to move to a discussion about the available cars for sale and why there is such a lack of awareness of these. Simply put, there aren't many comps on these. There aren't a lot of auction results to say, oh, this is what they typically sell for, partly because there's so few of them left and also partly because they're overlooked. So again, I'm focusing on the left-hand drive cars in Europe and in the United States mostly. So in Europe, they do come up from time to time. They've been going up in value. I've seen values or asking prices, I guess, in the 50 to about 70 to 75,000 euro range. In the US, most of the cars that we know in the BMW E12 M535 registry have been with their owners for many years, and they won't sell. They have no intention of selling. I'm not selling mine. I've owned it for 22 years now. But of that group, there are only about 15 cars in the United States, left-hand drive E12 M535s. There might be as many as 20 out there, but some of those have sort of been lost. Some are in really bad shape, a lot of rust, need full restoration, or a couple that just we don't know about because I think one got stolen, and then also some wrecks that are just written off. So call it 15 cars. The available amount of cars to purchase, theoretically, if anyone would even let one go, is 15 cars, unless you're going to import one from Europe. So that's really because, as I said, these were not popular gray market cars in the 1980s, and not many of them survived. If you go to Bring a Trailer and look up E12 M535i's, there are only 2 cars listed in about 10 years. Both of them went through the auction. One was so early as before Bring a Trailer had auctions, but then that car showed up again. We know that car in our registry, by the way. So not many comps. I would suggest also to just get a sense of these cars and do the research on them by reading this book by Jonathan Cohen. This is how I learned about the E12 M535 and started searching for one over 20 years ago and found mine. But this goes through all the detail about how they were produced, how special they are, and how rare they were, even when this book was written in the 1990s. Okay, my closing thoughts here. Today, if you look at BMW Motorsport car collections on YouTube, there are many of them. Some big auction houses have had big car collections auctioned at one time from a private collector, and they'll have things like M1s and 2002 turbos. They'll have a CSL, of course. They always ignore the E12 M535i. Only BMW has one in their museum, in their collection. None of the other notable collections or so-called best of the best BMW M car collections have one of these. So if you look at these videos, and I'm going to show some screenshots or some other sources to go look back at auctions, people should be asking, why is the E12 M535i not included with an M1, with a CSL, with a 2002 turbo? These cars, and as I call them the Fab Four of the era, they were all street car specials from BMW's racing program. So the E12 should definitely be there. Another thing is, too many BMW enthusiasts have listened to the M Power snobs, the internet forum commentary, and just flat out misinformation about what this car is and its origins. Even Cars and Bids, Doug DeMuro's platform, had an E28 M5 video that aired in the fall of 2025, and they did not do their research. They repeated the misconceptions, the false information about this car as if it's fact. And I'm sure everyone's going to watch that video, and I'm going to include a snippet of it now. They're going to watch that video and start repeating it to everyone else, saying, well, I know that the E12 is not a real motorsport product because this is what they said.
An M36 cylinder engine, a normal BMW power plant. It had a lot of cool touches, but it really wasn't a true M car built under the M brand.
They need to get their facts straight. Furthermore, I think the other error that is happening is the E12s are being lumped in with the E28 M535i because they have the same model name. The Cars and Bids video goes on to say that after the bit that I'm including, and it blends that E28, E12 period together, but they're completely different cars. They made so many more of the E28 M535i. It was not made at BMW Motorsport. They came with automatic transmissions. The E12 M535i's were manual only. And so putting those two together just, it does a disservice to the E12, and that's another reason I believe people are overlooking the motorsport heritage of this car. As I said, I think these cars are undervalued. It has all the great 70s and 80s BMW Motorsport looks with the stripe package. The O2s had the stripe package, the turbo O2s, the CSLs, and even some of the M1s. They did the M stripes, especially on the M1 Pro cars. But yet, if you can find an E12 M535i, they're maybe a half or a third of the price of a good 2002 turbo. They're a tenth of what a CSL costs and a fraction of what an M1 costs. But you know, I did go through the production numbers of these cars, and they're far rarer than E28 M5s and E30 M3s, and they're historically a pivot point for BMW Motorsport and their history. So the valuation just doesn't make sense. I did even commission a car appraiser who does 6- and 7-figure Ferraris to research this car, and he admitted he didn't even know it existed. He thought he knew BMWs, he knew the M5's history. He never knew about the E12 M535, and the more he dug in, he said, there's just no comps of these, so it's hard to even value what it is. The next one that hits the market in a public large auction with the left-hand drive version will probably set the new the value point that everyone refers to. So just another summary here, the E12 M535 ticks all the right boxes for a motorsport and BMW collector. Low production. It's a true motorsport built car. It's a first of its kind model for BMW M to start building M-powered sedans. It's a nostalgic and popular look from the early 80s design and the upright windshield and the boxy design. As BMW fans complete their M lineage car collections, the E12 M535 deserves to be part of the collection with a CSL, a 2002 turbo, and an M1. The last thing I'll summarize is the BMW Motorsport symbol the old symbol from the period that has the BMW roundel with the Motorsport colors in there before the M stripes. That was used on the E12 M535. It's in the steering wheel. It's also embossed on the front and rear spoilers. I'm going to include photos of that. In 2022, BMW Motorsport had their 50th anniversary, and you could get that symbol on your car for the roundels on the hood and the trunk. For the M3, the M4, but even the X3M. And I just find it laughable that this car is discounted and not included in the motorsport history books, but yet people think they can show their passion for BMW Motorsport's 50 years by having a motorsport roundel on their X3M. So like there's such a dichotomy and just contradictory opinions about this car that are not true. Yeah, so I think that's my analysis. Those are the facts I'm outlining. I hope you agree with me. I hope that I've educated on the rarity and the motorsport pedigree of these cars, how they were built, why they were built, why they're so rare, and why they're justified in being more heavily considered in true BMW enthusiast collections. I will just close with a thought from Ed Bolian and the VinWiki channel. He's talked a lot about rarity of cars and overlooked cars, especially with his work on Murciélagos and the manual transmission cars. But he says rarity does not equal desirability. That is true, but I think these cars have been overlooked because they are so rare. People discounted them. They believed the internet trolls and what they said about why these weren't true M cars. So most people have never seen one, and they've never driven one to even decide if they desire it or not. So I'll close with that. Thanks for watching.